office of Catalonia. And we've been publishing APIs since 2009. Now, selling APIs inside the government is really difficult. It was very, very difficult in 2008 when we began the project. It's still difficult. This is the moment when President Obama was told about the White House APIs. And this is his reply. What in the heck does that mean? And we got that reply many times. We also have to face the fact that in 2008 there were many government APIs. Now this has changed dramatically. In the US government alone, there's a list of more than 500 APIs. And even though President Obama doesn't know exactly what an API is, in his digital government strategy, APIs are a very important piece. This is really about better serving our citizens. No? In fact, it's about letting citizens better serve themselves. So it's about transforming the government into a platform, which is quite a radical transformation. Now, government does many things. It has many agencies. Most of the government agencies are service providers. The reason of existence of those agencies is to provide some service. Think, for example, in the postal service. The way to interact with these service-centric agencies has not been traditionally the use of an application programming interface, but instead this interface. You go to an office, you wait in line, you talk to a public servant through a window, and probably you exchange some papers. Of course, we have put computers in both sides of this window, and we have built websites in the middle to take care of these transactional services. Many times these new windows don't look that different from the teller window. For instance, this website even has office hours. If you go to this website after midnight, it's closed. Now, of course, the benefit of using APIs here, it's enormous. For instance, we could improve the user interfaces. The government could develop an API and let contractors compete for the best interface. And the more important, we could integrate different processes. In major life events, we usually have to deal with different government agencies. Having APIs, we could try to integrate those processes, even with the private sector. Now, unfortunately, to do this, you need write APIs. And most government APIs are read APIs. They are read only. There are some incredible exceptions, like, for example, the IRS FI system that allows commercial software to manage your taxes. But this is really a big exception. But things are being tried experimentally. So I think this is the next stage in APIs. But we are not yet there. So what we have is read APIs. Now, this is an example of a read API. You know, the police is a service-centric agency. It's about law enforcement. And they have an API, the UK police in this case. Now, if you look at the API, this API allows you to get information about the nearest police station, about neighborhood team members, about street-level crime, about upcoming events, whatever that is. But it doesn't allow you to report a crime. So this is really, this is not, because it's not an array API, no? This is not really about opening the service of the police. This API is not about law enforcement. Or another example, the healthcare.gov API. This API allows you to get the content of the website in JSON, which is interesting, but it's not about providing healthcare. This is not about the core business of this agency. What these APIs are is about opening the data that these agencies collect as a byproduct. this is not about really about transforming these agencies into a platform, but instead about opening their data, about transparency. To really open these, to transform these agencies into a platform, they must open their services. Now, not all the agencies are service providers. Some agencies are data producers and curators. And for these agencies, think, for example, of in statistical offices or in national mapping agencies or in weather services. For these type of agencies, open data is the same as transforming themselves into a platform, because their core business is disseminating data. Now, for these agencies, or at least for statistical offices, this has never been the interface. Our interface was this. We used to act as book publishers. We produce data, we group them in tables, we added a cover, and we offer it, we bound it together and offer it as a book. And when we went online, we didn't change that much. This is not, this table here is not even an HTML table. We put data in cells, that's what we do, right? Now, data has a minor inconvenience. Data has no intrinsic value. Data is not useful in itself. You have to add knowledge. You have to add more data. You have to add theories to get value from data. This is really very different from a service. A service is useful in itself. The public transit system allows you to go from point A to point V. The railroad is useless in itself. It needs the train. So data is like the railroad. It's an infrastructure. And this is a very weird way of building an infrastructure. And of course, an infrastructure is useless unless something is built on top of it. So for data-centric agencies, reuse is a matter of survival. We need our data to be reused as much as possible in as many places as possible, in as many ways as possible. We are somehow in the business of reference. We seek the maximum exposure and reach of our data. And of course, for this goal, APIs can play a central role. APIs to be really to be effective for this goal, in my opinion, need to be free, open, and easy. Now, by free, I mean, of course, that developers don't have to pay to use the API, but I need more things. I mean more things. Why APIs are free? Well, if an API is free for developers, it's because it has already been paid by taxpayers, which means that it has been considered a basic service, something that it's included. So if APIs are a basic service, as they should, you shouldn't be able to shut them down. I mean, APIs is the basic service. It's the only thing that you cannot shut down. They must be open. By open, I mean that the experience of using these APIs should be frictionless, that there are no barriers to entry. This connects too with the developer usability, but the main barrier to entry is this form that you have to fill before using the API. Why do I have to provide my phone number to try an API? Why do I have to describe the proposed use? And what's worse, I have to do this for the Brooklyn Museum, but I have to do this also for the Chicago Transit Authority. I even have to do this for this share API. The Open 311 API is an API that allows you to, is a write API that allows you to send data, non-emergency calls, to the city administration. And many cities in the US have implemented this API. And it's the same API for everyone. But you have to fill this form for every city. So your application, if you build an application that benefits from this API, you will have to have a different API key for every city that you are getting and you are sending data. This is the San Francisco form. This is the city of Baltimore form. It's the same form. It's a different API key. So this is really a nightmare. And some agencies, in fact, are beginning to remove the requirement of authentication. That's the case of the World Bank that was cited by Kim. Until recently, it was necessary to use an API key to make calls to the API. This has changed. You no longer need an API key. Or the police, which is rather unexpected that the police doesn't require authentication. It's probably the only place that they don't require this. I think this is it's a radical decision because you are in the dark. You are not getting information about your customers. So but we have to minimize somehow the number of API keys that the developer has to manage. And probably the right approach is the approach that the US government is implementing right now, which is trying to offer a single API key for several agencies. So in order that you don't have to have an API key for every agency in the United States. Now, of course, this is just a partial solution because it doesn't solve the problem of the Brooklyn Museum, which is a different administration. It doesn't solve the problem of the Chicago Transit Authority because it's a different administration. So I think we have to take this to the next level, whatever that level is. I don't know exactly what that solution is. Maybe something like a federated identity verification of developers. I don't know. Now, the last word is the more important one. It's easy, which of course has to do also with developer experience, but I will only focus for me, the most important element that affects simplicity. Because developing an application is already hard. Getting the data should be that simple, right? And I will just put an example based on the notorious case of statistical offices, even though I think this happened in other sectors. Now, Keane told about the Census Bureau. He has been working with the Census Bureau. Now, this is how statistics are exposed by the Census Bureau. It's like a CSV, but in JSON, as you see. Now, let's compare this to another US government agency, which also deals with statistics, which is the department, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. As you can see, they use a different model. This is different from the previous one. Now, you could say that, of course, the Bureau of Labor Statistics belongs to the Department of Labor, while the Census Bureau belongs to the Department of Commerce. But here is another example from an agency from the Department of Commerce, that is, from the same department as the Census Bureau, and they have another way of expressing statistics. And if you look at it, they are very similar. They have some time dimension here. They have some space dimension here. They have some value expressed as a string. Weird, because this is a number. They have some metric, per capita personal income. They have some unit of measure, US dollars. And if you look at other statistical providers, you'll find the same problem. This is the World Bank. The World Bank has this another way of expressing statistics, even though it's very similar. You have some value, again as a string, weird. You have some space dimension. You have some time dimension. You have some metric, GDP. You have the units inside the metric, covering US dollars. And I could go on and on. As you can see, in Sweden, they have another way of expressing this, even though it's the same kind of model. It's a cubic model where data is described in terms of dimensions, which is what we usually do in statistics. This is actually a table, if you want. So to wrap up, if the next stage for service providers, I think that should be right APIs. For data providers, should be common APIs. standard endpoints, standard responses, in order to help enabling helper libraries, in order to decoupling applications from data providers. This is my contribution to this goal. This is the JSON stat format. It's a proposed format for expressing statistics that has already been adopted by Statistics Norway. And that's why also initiatives like the API Commons are so important. Thank you.
Some question for Xavier?
I was just wondering if you thought that maybe some sort of reference consumers of data would be useful for people producing data, so they could design the data format in a way that it could be consumed by an existing implementation. So instead of doing it around a data format or a document, could you actually have some consumers of census data, and then various departments or countries could try and produce the data in a way that could be consumed easily?
Could you speak louder? Because I'm not sure I understood.
So do you think if some sort of reference implementation of consumers of data would be useful to help people produce data in a way that would be easily consumable, as opposed to working around documents defining the format? See what I mean?
What do you mean by documents defining the format?
Well, I mean, it's a specification. So instead of a specification, if you actually had some reference implementations you could test against when you were producing data. So you could ensure that somebody was capable of consuming it in a predefined way.
The JSON stat format comes with several libraries. And we have several examples of consuming the Statistics Norway data. So you actually we have a library for JavaScript, we have a library for R, the statistical language, we have a library for Java, and a library for Python. So this work like examples, and it's a place where you can try to test if your JSON stat file is correctly built. This is really in early stages anyway. So there is a different standard discussed at a different level, which is the SDMX standard, which is the official standard. But the World Bank is an sponsor of this standard, and it doesn't use that standard. And in fact, 3Scale, some years ago, developed, because the UN API was based on the SDMX standard, which is an XML standard, they built a different API to allow for mobile applications to take benefit from the UN data, because the SDMX standard is not really fit for that.
What do you think about private initiative trying to gather open data like Socrata, for example? So what do you think about that? Does the private companies can bring to the open data ecosystem with unification with standards, or you think it has to be completely on the .org on the non-profit side?
I'm not sure about that, because when the non-profit side has tried to build standards, they have built some, I would say, some unhealthy ecosystem. And I think the SDMX is a good example of this. You have big organizations like the World Bank, the Eurostat, the United Nations, the IMF, the OECD discussing this standard, and they have, at the end of the day, they have let a contractor build that standard according to their requirements. And the result of this is the SDMX standard, which is really so different from the standards that you find on the web, and it's so complicated. There is no reference document in a usable form. You have about 20 PDFs files that you have to read to be able to use that. So even on paper, I would say that yes, that this should be done by these .org organizations. I think that some open air should be, I mean, they should be more open than this, because usually this doesn't deal, it doesn't get you to some to healthy practices. Let me say it like that.
One last question for Xavier. I'm proud to know how to pronounce your name. So
Xavier.
Xavier.
Or Xavier. Or Xavier.
In French, we say Xavier. Xavier.
Oui, je sais.
So thank you, Xavier. Thank you very much. And actually, the last speakers had family issues, so he will not be attending. So it's now the time for some food and beers. The last one, and tomorrow it will begin at 9:30 with company. Kinlane will be talking again. 3Scale, Dropbox, Heroku, Twitter. So a lot of good people that comes from far. So see you tomorrow morning.
You're welcome.